name is Emily, and this story is about a camping experience I will never forget. But even as I write this down, I still ask myself the same question. What was real, and what was just a dream? My channel is so close to reaching 100 subscribers. If you haven't subscribed yet, it's completely free and would mean a lot if you supported me. Let me know in the comments if you subscribed. I'll be dropping a heart on those comments. And don't forget to share this video. Last summer, my 4 friends and I decided to go on our annual summer camping trip to a remote place. We wanted to escape all the noise of the city and create our own secluded spot in the middle of nature. However, this campsite was going to be the place that would bring our deepest fears to life. We went to a place called Hollow Ridge, an abandoned region. No one ever came here. There were only whispers about its dark history on a few old forums online. But we still didn't think much of it. We were planning to have some fun. The first night, we gathered around the fire, telling each other old stories. Everything was normal. We laughed all night, sang songs, and soaked in the peace of nature. But as the night went on, something started to change. A silence fell over the forest. No birds, no insects. We all started looking at each other, and then a whisper came from deep within the woods. It came from far away, yet it sounded as though it was right next to our ears, but we saw nothing. Someone was whispering something. "Before you leave, you must stay here." Everyone looked at each other in fear. I asked, "Didn't anyone hear that?" But no one answered. Only fear was visible in their eyes. The second night, things got even stranger. The forest was filled with an unsettling energy. As we were heading to our tents, we saw something. A silhouette appeared between the tall trees. It was twisted and malformed, almost like a deformed human figure. We quickly went to look, but it vanished in an instant. That night, we couldn't sleep. We kept calling out to each other, but found no one. An hour later, we noticed something hanging from an old post at the edge of the campsite. We approached. It was a faceless mask. By morning, no one said anything. But then, we noticed something. Each of our tents had shifted slightly. Without realizing it, we had moved deeper into the forest overnight. Our tents were now placed around an old stone structure. It was an ancient settlement. And behind the structure, there was a large well buried underground. We looked at each other. And then, at that moment, I heard another voice coming from that direction. "Finally, we are here." For a moment, I didn't understand. The voice was so close, but I couldn't see anyone. Someone was watching me, but I still couldn't figure out who. We walked towards the well, our steps growing heavier. With each step, the darkness beneath the ground grew deeper. The mouth of the well was a dark, ominous void. But something was inside. It felt like there was another world in there, waiting for us. At that moment, Riley took another step. And suddenly, she vanished. I tried to follow her with my eyes, but I saw nothing. I felt like I was losing myself. Bennett immediately started calling her, but our voices didn't echo back. The only thing left was the well, and suddenly, everything changed. We went back to the campsite to try again. But our campsite had disappeared. All our tents were gone. All that remained were those strange, old structures. I felt a sense of loneliness wash over me, as if the world had shifted in an instant. Hours later, while wandering helplessly through the woods, everything began to darken. Suddenly, it was night. We hadn't even waited for the sunset, and the darkness was echoing in my ears. By morning, when I opened my eyes, everything had returned to its original state. Our tents were back in their places. But there was a feeling inside me. Something was very different. As I opened my eyes, Everything in the forest seemed to be in place. But my friends were gone. Bennett's tent was empty. Riley's guitar lay in front of her tent, abandoned. And the tracks left in the dirt were pulling me deeper. A voice came from behind me. "Don't go, because time will come back." Slowly, I walked towards the well. But with each step, something changed. The color of the air, the intensity of the sounds. Something was holding me to this world, but at the same time pushing me away. Finally, I reached the edge of the well. There was a voice watching me. But this time, I knew who it was. That voice was the one that wanted me to disappear. And suddenly, everything began to darken. All that was left was facing that old mask. If this story pulled you in, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Because sometimes, an abandoned campsite can pull you in forever. My name is Kate, I'm 23, and this story is about a journey through a place where time disappears into fear. Last summer, my 3 friends, Laura, Sam, and I decided to go camping by a secluded river. We wanted to venture deep into the forest and find peace in nature's silence. We planned to stay there, completely disconnected from the outside world. But things didn't go as planned. After a long drive, we arrived at the campsite. Everything was beautiful. The area by the river was calm, surrounded only by trees. We set up our tents and waited for evening to come. While we were waiting, Laura found an old map. The map showed traces of a long-abandoned settlement in the area. The settlement had been deserted years ago, but there were some strange markings on the map. It said, "Echoes." Sam noticed this and joked, "This place is lost to time. We can fearlessly explore it." We all smiled at the joke, but I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling growing inside me. That first night, we gathered around the fire. Everything seemed normal. But as the hours passed, something in the forest started to feel off. Suddenly, it seemed like the forest echoed with a sound we had never heard before. It wasn't a scream, but something far away. And that sound seemed to echo back at us. Sam started laughing. Maybe the wind is making things echo through the mountains," he said. But that night, we didn't realize it, but something was watching us. The next day, when we woke up, Laura was gone. Her tent was empty, and there were no signs of where she went. And then, the sounds started again. The screams, now much closer. Something was watching us, but we couldn't see it. Sam and I decided to venture deeper into the forest. We spotted an abandoned structure near the river. Decayed stones, broken walls. But there was a sound coming from inside. It was repeating our names, but it wasn't our voices. For a moment, we felt like the sounds were pulling us toward it. Sam, frightened, said, "This place, it was abandoned. No one should be here." But we kept moving forward. As we approached the structure, a voice echoed from the old stones, and our vision began to fade. Everything blurred, and we were just disappearing. Then, we suddenly heard Lara's voice. It was so close, but it sounded as if it was lost in time. And that moment, we too disappeared. The next morning, when I woke up, everything seemed normal. But the campsite was different. Laura, Sam, and I found ourselves right in front of that abandoned structure. But the shock in our eyes told us how strange time had become. Something was waiting to take another step with us. I couldn't look any longer. I tried to run away, but the echoes from the river slowly started to return. Everything has an echo, but those who are lost never return. The story ended on an irreversible journey, because every echo returned with the sound of something lost. If this story took you in, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Because some campsites are echoes of lost places. My name is Chris, and this story is about a camping experience you wouldn't expect. Somehow, in the deep woods, my friends and I pushed the boundaries of time and space. Last summer, 4 of my friends and I decided to go to a camping spot we had never heard of. In fact, it was a place that wasn't even mentioned on the maps. My friend Jordan said, "This is the calmest part of the forest. You'll feel like everything disappears when you're here." At first, it seemed like a joke, but then we realized how isolated the camping spot was, and we got excited. We set off and ventured deeper into the forest. The path was long and challenging, but eventually, we reached the campsite. We were surrounded by trees, and there were no signs of life. The stillness in the air was uncanny. We immediately set up our tents. Everything was silent, as if there were things around us we couldn't see. As evening approached, we gathered around the fire. Jordan had found an old camera. It was almost broken, but inside it were old photographs. Some of the photos had faint writing on the edges. "Do not remember the past." This caught our attention for a few minutes. Jokingly, we said, "These must be from old times. This is probably a very old campsite." That night, things started to get strange. Throughout the night, we noticed something moving around the fire. We all stared at it, but nothing was visible. There was no animal, no wind. Everything was still. For a moment, we seemed to forget about the existence of the forest around us. The next morning, when we woke up, everything at the campsite was different. Our tents had shifted a bit. Jordan's camera was gone. But we noticed something even more terrifying. There were very old footprints around us, but they didn't belong to humans. They hadn't been covered by dirt, and they still looked fresh, as if they had just appeared. That morning, we noticed something. As we looked around, something in the depth of the forest was watching us. Suddenly, we heard a sound. It was a whisper, as if speaking in an ancient language. Jordan, turning pale, screamed, "We're all here." He was so frightened that he barely remembered what he said. But just at that moment, a light began to shine. The light was coming from around an ancient structure. The walls of the building were crumbling, but the light was coming from inside it. A few steps away from us, a figure appeared among the ruins of the old stone structure. Something was moving behind the walls, but we couldn't see what it was. In that moment, we all heard the sounds. Taking a deep breath, we backed away. This place was where time had become distorted. With every step, everything began to blur. When we opened our eyes, we were back at the campsite, but everything was different. The footprints had vanished. Jordan's camera was back in place. But the unease inside me was so overwhelming that at that moment, we just wanted to run. Every minute we spent there felt like it had lasted for years. Finally, after what felt like hours, the nature around us began to return to its old state. But there was something missing in the forest, just like those old photographs. The reflection of the past begins where time has disappeared. And so, that campsite left us, and we stepped into another world, from a place where time had been lost. If this story captivated you, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because some forests are lost in the infinities of time. My name is Mia, and this story is about a journey lost in a fear beyond what you could ever imagine. Last summer, my 3 friends Max, Lily, and I decided to go to a campsite that wasn't even marked on the map. We set off at the suggestion of a friend. We had to reach a mysterious lake deep within the forest. It started as an ordinary camping trip for us, but the spot by the river was anything but ordinary. As we moved deeper into the forest, the path grew tougher and steeper. The trees were so dense that we couldn't even see the sky. But eventually, we reached a clearing and came upon a massive lake. The water was crystal clear, but there was hardly any life around it. We stumbled upon an old stone pier. It seemed like people had come here long ago, but it had clearly been abandoned for a long time. We began to set up camp by the lakeshore and spent the first night around the fire. As night fell, we noticed something strange. There were no waves in the lake, but a thin layer of mist hovered on the surface. Max jokingly said, "This water must be really cold," but we had a strange feeling. The water seemed to move around us silently, but it didn't ripple. It was as though something was preventing the lake from reaching us. As the night went on, we started to hear a sound. At first, it seemed like the wind, but then the sounds became clearer. There was something whispering over the lake. "You can't see me, but I've always been here," the voice seemed to say, coming from deep within the water. At first, nobody took it seriously, but the voice grew closer. That night, Max suddenly woke up and said, "Everyone be quiet. There's something here." We all listened, wide-eyed and terrified. For a moment, something seemed to move in the water, but we couldn't quite make it out. The next morning, we found some strange footprints by the lakeshore. But these prints, they weren't ours. Each footprint was strangely round and distinct, as if made by something else, not a person. A few hours later, we decided to move deeper into the forest, trying to distance ourselves from the lake. But something felt off. Slowly, we began to notice that everything around the lake was becoming increasingly alien. Suddenly, we heard Lily's voice. "There's something here, everything is changing." We quickly looked around, but nothing seemed to change. Still, there was something, a feeling. Every tree facing the lake seemed to be looking in a different direction. That's when we realized Lily was gone. Looking toward the river, we saw she had disappeared into the water. All that remained was a figure moving across the surface, but no matter how much we screamed, that figure vanished. As we approached the lake, we found Lily's tracks again, but something was strange. These weren't her footprints. It was as if someone else had taken her back. With every step we took near the shore, more tracks seemed to disappear. In deep silence and fear, we felt something circling around us. The water of the lake was the place where everything lost would return. Just like Lily had vanished, everything seemed to fade away slowly. Eventually, in terror, we decided to leave the lake behind. But we could never go back. That water was the place where everything disappeared. If this story captivated you, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Some lakes hold the lost souls beneath their depths.